I started off in high school, my three favourite subjects were biology, psychology and media. And then I did a zoology degree, took some time off, travelled the world, did a zookeeper stint for a little while. I was a zookeeper, yes, very briefly in South Africa, and I actually worked mainly with the big cats. So a lot of training of lions, tigers, cheetahs. It was really interesting, and I actually found the most value came from the interactions with the visitors when they came to the zoo and the conversations that we had. There was a lot of good takeaways in terms of how people wanted to act for wildlife but just didn't know how to do it. And so going to a zoo, seeing the animal, feeling that emotion, and then wanting to do something about it, that was that perfect point to sort of impact them and tell them what they could do. So I found that probably the most powerful part of that job. And I found I really enjoyed the wildlife side of things, but also the human side of things. So I ended up doing a project that encompassed biology, psychology, and media. And it was basically looking at photos of humans and animals together when they're posted on social media. What sort of perceptions does that give people about the animal that's in the photograph? Photos of humans and animals together make people think the animal is less endangered. And then on a behavioural side of things, it makes people think that the animal would make a good pet, which is exacerbating the illegal exotic pet trade. And we also found that it makes people more likely to want to go up and touch that animal as well, which is a problem for the welfare of the animal, but also, as we're seeing in the news with human-wildlife conflict, also an issue for people as well. And so that was, I guess, the start of my excitement. It was the first time I studied something and it didn't feel like study anymore. It felt like something I was passionate about. So I continued on with that, did a PhD in a very similar area looking at photos of wildlife and what they get people to think, how they inspire conservation action, and then ended up at BehaviourWorks at the end of my PhD. The biggest challenge, I think, in behaviour change today is, particularly in conservation and environmental management and climate change, is looking at how we deal with people acting for the social good. It's sort of a delayed gratification where, I might do something, I don't see the impact of that every single day. I'm not seeing a benefit from it, so I start to feel like I'm not doing the right thing or that what I'm doing isn't having any impact. And so we see that a lot in conservation where, it might be put some water out for a bird in your back garden. Most of the time you don't see a bird come and drink from that water. But on a really hot day, that's when the bird will come and drink from it. And if more and more people are doing it, more and more birds have access to it. So you're only seeing a really small impact and only getting a little bit of good out of it. But it's when more and more people are doing the right thing that we actually see positive change for society. We do live in a community where people want instant feedback or reward, and I mean, part of it's social media. Yeah, so the challenge for conservation is that it takes a long time to have an effect. The changes that we make take a really long time to come into effect. If we reintroduce an animal into an environment, it might take 20 years for that population to build up to the point where it's sustainable in that environment, for example. And then often a lot of the field work that's happening in conservation is not stuff that we see day to day. So we aren't seeing the effects of the actions that we're having. It's the same thing a bit with climate change on a different sort of level, because a lot of the climate change stuff is happening away from us. We hear about natural disasters, but I mean, we in Melbourne don't have natural disasters every single day, yet our behaviour is causing natural disasters, warming, and so that's been a huge issue. And interestingly, with imagery of climate change, we tend to use things like polar bears and melting ice caps as an example of climate change. And so that has framed climate change as something that is a faraway issue that isn't relevant to us and therefore is not something we need to worry about right now.